Hey guys, it's Max. I just got a box in the mail, something that I've been waiting for a while now. Of course, you know what that is. It's the Tamron 17-28 F2.8 lens. We're going to be taking a look at it, testing it out, and comparing it directly against the Sony 16-35 G Master lens. This might be my favorite G Master lens out of all of them. I was super impressed at the launch event. I do have a full review, which you guys can go and check out. It is super sharp, really nice lens, but there's just one thing that is wrong with it. And it's not really wrong, it just kind of sucks, and that is the price tag. This thing is $2,200, so even more expensive than my A7 III. Of course, if you have the money, it is an awesome lens, but this is where Tamron is stepping in once again, giving us a good value option. 17-28, not as versatile of a range, but it's $900 instead of $2,200. You can buy two of these new instead of one of these used. All right. Okay. This feels, I don't want to say it feels like a toy because that's kind of an insult. The build quality is basically the same as the 28-75. The materials look to be the same. It actually looks better. That's interesting. On the 28-75, there's a little line when the plastic was molded. This doesn't have that, so it looks like they could have improved that. Of course, it still has the same layout, so the zoom is at the top and the focus is closer to the body. That was a downside of this Tamron, but I did get used to it, didn't have any issues. But I'm surprised by how lightweight it is. I wanted to make this video a little bit different, a little more interesting, so I'm not just sitting at my office, I'm out here in my backyard. And with that said, sorry if you have some, barking, some wind noise, a FedEx truck driving by or something like that, or some hot spots here. But the first thing I want to look at is sharpness. So I have my shed over there. I'm going to take a series of photos, both center and corner, and we'll see how these compare in terms of sharpness. The 28-75 is very sharp, so I expect the 17-28 to be very good. Now, before we get into that, there's one thing I want to mention, is that's how tight this lens attaches. So I just put it on before recording, and I almost have to force it to get it in. It feels like I have to push a little too hard. I don't have that with my other Tamron, with the G Master, and with this one, I don't know, maybe it'll just wear in after a little while, but with native Sony lenses, you don't get that issue. So let's take some shots. Taking a look at the full shots, it is incredible how similar they look. Just a little bit of a white balance temperature shift, and if we go ahead and do a center crop at 400%, they are so close. Even on a 5K display, I would say the Sony might be just a hair sharper, but if we stop down to f5.6, now the Tamron looks just slightly sharper. And looking at the extreme corners here, I think the Sony is just ever so slightly sharper. If we stop down to f5.6, now the Tamron is taking the lead. And going into 28mm now, center crop here at 5.6, it's close. I think the Tamron is just very slightly sharper. Corners here at 2.8, I would give it to the Sony, but when we stop down to 5.6, just slightly sharper with the Tamron. So just like the Sony, you actually do have the punch in if you go into manual focus. You should have eye autofocus as well, but one thing you don't get is a manual focus switch on the side, which I really like, and that customizable button. This is just a simple design. Now, another difference is this zooms internally, the Tamron does. So if you're throwing it on a gimbal, it's not going to throw off your balance. It'll barely change when you're adjusting your zoom. Whereas the 16-35, as you guys can see, it extends. Not a whole lot, but a lot of glass is right up here at the front, so that will throw off some of the balance. And in the front, both of these are 2.8s, but because of the fact that this is a 16-35, that extra range makes it much larger. We have an 82mm filter on the front compared to just 67mm, which actually matches up exactly to the 28-75 and a couple other lenses that I have. So that is very convenient. What's up, dude? All right. Hey. This little guy came out to join me. Your face is all dirty. Let's go ahead and test out the autofocusing system, both in stills and in video. Autofocusing isn't that important in a lens that is so wide compared to, say, like a portrait lens. A lot of times you're not doing a bunch of action or anything like that, but let's see if we have any differences. The Tamron was much slower. It took 18 seconds to take 20 consecutive photos using a single autofocusing point, compared to just 12 seconds on the Sony, and it was really noticeable when I was taking photos. Now, I also tested video, and I found something that I was not expecting expecting. Both were very smooth and had good motion and they were silent, but the Sony has much more focus shifting, so the focal length changes when it's focusing, whereas the Tamron has almost none, more like a Cine lens. You guys may have noticed some of the bokeh in a few of these tests. Let's take a closer look at that. To compare the bokeh, I shot at 28mm F2.8 and they are very close. The Sony is a little bit smoother, it's a little bit cleaner here, so it definitely is better, but this is a much closer comparison than the 28-75 Tamron to the G Master 24-70, so good job Tamron. The sun just peaked out once again, and this is the perfect time to test out flaring. Now this is an issue that a lot of people have when they're shooting really wide because of how susceptible these curved front elements are, and different coatings will improve and reduce flaring. That's one area where I think the G Master is going to be quite a ways ahead of the less expensive Tamron, but let's take a look. Now this is something that I was not expecting. If we look at the Tamron, overall it has better contrast, the flaring is more controlled, it's a little more extreme in the corners with different colors, but towards the center, the Sony has a lot going on. There are a lot of circles, different colors. The Tamron just has that one little hot spot. And in this shot, when we're not shooting directly into the sun, the Tamron is pretty much perfectly clean, whereas the Sony does have a couple marks over there and lower contrast as well. So this was surprising. I'm guessing that's because the Sony is wider, has a bigger front element, but the Tamron does win here. I'm not sure if you ever wanted me to be this close to the camera, but now we are going to test out minimal focusing distances just in case you want to shoot some macro or close to macro with your wide angle lens. As you guys can see, the Tamron can get quite a bit closer than the Sony for macro photos, both on the long end at 28mm and on the wide end at 17. And this is another area where the Tamron 28-75 does better than the G Master. So the last question that you guys probably have that unfortunately I can't answer for you, and I can't even answer for myself, at least until my full review comes out, is the 17mm on the Tamron wide enough compared to the 16? So here you guys will see some shots side by side, and this is like the worst time to shoot for some real estate stuff, just of my house here, but just to show you guys an example of the difference. In this kind of a scenario where, you know, the rooms are big enough, I think that the 17mm is just fine, even for like a smaller kitchen. In the bathrooms, you probably would want something wider. And another thing to consider, if you're doing videos, not photos, but if you're doing videos and you're shooting with a camera like the A7 III that has a 1.2 times crop, if you're shooting 4K 30, that will affect it. Now these shots were 4K 24, but for a lot of stuff I want to go to 4K 30, just get smoother results, and there the 17mm might be a little bit more limiting. Ignore my kids messing around in that room over there. Now as far as balancing on a gimbal, I have the Ronin SC, and I was able to balance the G Master 16-35. I am absolutely maxing out the plate and moving it all the way back in order to balance it, and unfortunately with that, we are touching the eye cup, whereas the Tamron 17-28, that thing is lightweight, there's no issues at all. So as far as weight-wise, I'd rather go with the Tamron in size. But of course it's giving you a little bit wider of a shot. Now I will be doing a review of this lens. I hope to do a couple of real estate jobs, show you guys some of those examples, and get some real world usage out of it before I give you a full review. So make sure you guys are subscribed with notifications enabled if you guys want to check out that video. But of course for some people this is just going to be the no-brainer because of the price tag, even if it's not as good in certain categories. Now on the longer end, the 28mm, I personally don't mind that. This goes to 35, sure it's nice, but I would much rather take the trade-off of size and weight and lose a little bit on the long end. So let me know your thoughts down below. Overall, you guys saw all of these tests. What impressed you? What kind of were you surprised by? I'd love to hear your guys' opinions. If you guys want to buy either one of these, I have links down in the description below. If you guys buy through those, that helps me to be able to make more videos like this one, so definitely appreciate it. And if you're a subscriber already, make sure you guys enable those notifications so you guys don't miss out on future videos. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.